Hi guys, in this video I give an introduction to array. I start out explaining what an array is, then I go over the declaration, initialization, then I show how to get the number of elements as well as the first or last index, and then I demonstrate how to access elements in an array. So let's start out by first, what is an array? So far you should be familiar with variables. Basic variables store a single value. So we have some location in memory where we can store a single value based on the data type of the variable. Arrays take this notion a step further by not just having a single location where we can store a value, but storing multiple values. So drawing this out, we still have an identifier that refers to a single memory location, but now we have multiple values that we can store at this location. And all these values are stored consecutively. So they are stored one after another. These values are referred to as elements. So whenever we refer to the values in an array, those are called elements. Now, just having the identifier alone is not enough to say which element in the array we are targeting. For example, to update it or to read it. We need more than just the identifier. And what we need is called an index. So the index starts at 0, then 1, 2, 3, and so on, depending how long the array is. There's no limit in the array size. So an array could be one element, could be 4 elements as it is here, could be 100 elements, 1,000 elements. There's really no limit to it. Now what you see is that we have an index here, and the index helps us to address the element. So now we have the identifier with an index, and then we can target the element. Now if you wonder, why does the index start with 0? There's some reason for it. The reason is that the identifier really refers to the very first address, or the address of the very first element in the array. So this is the address here. And the index is really just an offset. You can imagine it like I give you a house number, and along with the house number, I tell you how many houses further you should go. So if I just give you the house number, you would arrive at the very first element here. This is the house. Now, if I want you to ring the doorbell at this house or go put something inside the house, deliver a package or something like a value, I would tell you 0 houses further. This is the address you're at. If I want you to go to this house, I would give you the address here and then tell you 1 house further. Or if I want you to go to the last house, you would get the address of the first one and then 1, 2, 3 houses further. So the index is really just an offset. And this is the reason why it starts at 0. And so when we have 4 elements or more, the last index is always the number of elements minus 1. So in this case here, the length is 4. We have 4 elements, and the indices range from 0 to 3, so length minus 1. Now, let's move on to declaration. So how can we declare an array? We have the element type. This is the data type, just like variables, but now we add brackets after it. And the brackets define we want to have an array. At declaration, we don't specify the length of the array. So for example, I call this numbers1. This would be an array of integers, no size specified. Now there's another syntax, so another way to write it, and this is putting the array notation at the end after the identifier. First one here is really the preferred way, because this we can quickly see what the real data type is. It's an array of integers. Here it looks more like an integer. The longer the variable name is, the harder it is to see that at the end it is actually an array. So it's always good to put the brackets at the beginning. Now let's talk about initialization. How can we initialize this array? Now, there are multiple ways to initialize it. The first one is to new int and then brackets, and in the brackets we specify the size. Now if I put 4 here, for example, it would create an array of 4 zeros. And the zeros are the default values. So you notice I did not specify any value here. I just simply say I want to have 4 integers, but the default value is always 0. Now another way to do it is new and no size specified, and in this case providing the values 5, 8, 1, 3, and 9, for example. Now since I did not specify the size here, the size will be inferred from this list of values, and this would create an array with 5, 8, 1, 3, and 9. Oops. So this is if I know the values before, I can just provide it. Now so far the initialization here, it is hard-coded. This could be a variable. So if we hold something in the variable because maybe the user entered it, we can use the variable here, and it will take the value of the variable to determine and create an array of that size. Same here. I have hard-coded values or literals, but this could be variables, right, that hold the values. Also, I created just integers arrays. Arrays can be of any data type. Could be integer, character, string, any object, really anything. Now let's talk about declaration and initialization combined. So let's use a different data type. Let's use char. And I call this letters 1, new char 26, for example. So this would create a character array with 26 elements, and it is already initialized. Now another way to write this is letters 2 equals new char, and providing the characters here, A, B, oops, missed the single quote, B, X, and G, for example. So this is basically the first two things I had here, just the array size and the exact element values combined. So declaration and initialization combined. And there's one more way to do this. Let's use another char, and I call this letters 3. The other way is just not specifying new char, simply providing the list here. G, B, I just pick random values here. So this is the third way, and this would create an array of G, B, X, and H characters. Now that we know how to declare and initialize an array, let's see how we can get the number of elements or length and indices of an array. So if I want to know number of elements, every array has a property. I can do letters 1 dot length. So every array has a dot length property. It gives me the number of elements. And this is very critical if I want to get the last element, for example. So we know the first element is at index 0. The last index will always be at the length minus 1, right? Up here we had length 4, so the last index will be 4 minus 1, which is 3. If we have this one here, 5 elements, 5 minus 1 will be index 4, this one. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that is why the length property is very important to access the last element, but also if you want to use a loop to iterate over the elements, we need to know how many elements are in the array. Now let's move on to the last part. How do we access elements? And for that, I take this here and copy it, and the index actually as well. And then I create a new array. This is called values equals new int 4. So this is the array I just created. Now when I want to access elements, I use the identifier values and the index in brackets. So with bracket 0, now I target the very first element here at index 0. If I do 5, this would place the 5 in the array. Now if I want to store something in the third element, I take index 2 equals 8, for example. This would place the 8 here. And if I want to store something in the last element, I take values.length minus 1 inside brackets. So this gives me the index of the very last element. And then I can assign something, for example 3. This would place 3 here. And now let's say I want to print out the values so that we print something. I use an integer-based for loop. So it starts at index 0. I is very conventional. I less than values.length and then I plus plus. And here I simply output print, and I put this in brackets, values at I, and then at the end I put a print line. So this simply iterates over all the indices. Starting with index 0, incrementing by 1, and ending with I less than length. Make sure that you don't do less than or equal to, because this will go over the bounds of the array, and you get an array index out of bounds exception, because you will try to access it right here, and for an array with length 4, there's no access. There's no element in here. It's invalid memory that we should not be accessing. So let's run this. And here we get 5, 0, 8, 3. So 5, 0, 8, and 3. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.